All right, I'm joined right now by frontman and creator of the electronic pop group Saint Lucia, Jean-Philippe Grobler, for an exclusive interview on We Found New Music. I'm doing great, and you're in Brooklyn at the moment, right?
Yes.
I guess I would kind of describe your sound as mostly electronic pop. It's kind of just a mix of everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, having spent most of the time in the studio doing everything, I would say there's probably equally as many synths as there are, acoustic instruments and like electric guitars and other stuff. It's just that the synths aren't just like they don't just play a background role, they play a kind of foreground role as well. So I think that's probably what draws people to saying that it's like synth pop.
So your debut album, Win the Night, is coming out October 8th, and that features about 11 tracks. We're proud supporters of your music here at We Found New Music, and we've worn out your EP. We've been playing probably a song from it almost every week, so we're really excited for the new stuff.
Great.
So you recently were on the West Coast over here. You played the Echo last week, and I was one of the fortunate few that were able to make it to that. I know there's a lot of people.
Dude, awesome.
Yeah, I know a lot of people were turned away, and the show sold out. You were mentioning that the Echo crowd was one of your best.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you. I mean, that was the first time that we played the album in that order, and we normally play the set in a completely different order. To kind of, and it's kind of set up to make the emotional peak be sort of more towards the end of the set, and to play the album in that order, I'm not sure that it's like the best order to play a live set in, because the end of the album has this kind of slightly darker tinge to it and slightly less of a party vibe, but then when you have an audience that responds as amazingly as the Echo did to something that you're feeling very nervous about, because it's very different to what you normally do, it's an amazing feeling. It's great.
So what's it like to perform the new material for your fans?
Well, there are some songs that we've been performing for a while, like Elevate and The Way You Remember Me, and those songs we've kind of, I like to think that we've somewhat mastered them, and it feels natural for us to play them. But the really, really new stuff, the thing for me was like I didn't want to make an album of like carbon copy tracks. I wanted the album to have a kind of story flow, and for some of the tracks to be a bit darker, so that the lighter songs can have context, and you sort of felt like you were going on a bit of a journey. And so, figuring out how to perform those songs live and let them have sort of as much impact as the other brighter, happier songs, but also to add to the dynamic flow of the show is definitely a challenge. And I think it's something that takes a while to kind of figure out, but it's definitely exciting. And, I think as an artist, if you're not challenging yourself and trying to do something new, you're kind of dead in the water in a way.
Sure. And what I really take out of your live experiences, you recreate the album so well live. I feel like it's just as big and amazing, and I feel like that's something that's not easy to do with electronic heavy music. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you approached creating this album live? Because I just feel like you get almost the same positive experience you get from listening to the album.
I appreciate that, man. Well, I think it's definitely a process of trial and error, and I'm very fortunate to be playing with a really great group of musicians who are all very technically gifted as well as very flexible. So I think that definitely helps, and it's just it normally takes a few rehearsals, and it takes a few days of me sitting by myself in the studio and figuring out like what each person's going to be playing, and we kind of have to play with tracks because we don't have enough money to like pay for a whole brass section and a gospel choir, so we have some stuff on tracks, but we try to have as little as possible. And we try to play at least all of the main parts, live.
I think that's really important because, people like to see, physical things going on while they're watching their favorite band,
Yeah, of course, of course.
So your album again is out October 8th. You have 2 singles out right now. Too Close is climbing the hype charts right now. And it feels like that song is such like a journey from beginning to end. It's kind of just like you're embarking on this journey. And then Elevate, of course, I'm sure you've heard it from many others. It's on constant repeat. What did it take to achieve such a huge sound and such a warm, reminiscent sound of, summer and the 80s and maybe John Hughes movies?
Well, it definitely took, a lot of trial and error. Like, I would say that the beginning part of writing that song was the easiest, just coming up with the chords and the basic kind of arrangement. I came up with the first half of that song before the sort of outro section in a night, basically. And then it took me a couple of weeks of trying to figure out what to do with the rest of the song. And then I realized that I had this kind of slightly Miami Sound Machine-ish bass line lying around somewhere that I'd come up with. And but it was something that I couldn't come up with a melody or sort of vocal part for. And I suddenly realized, that like the chorus of Elevate works with that bass line under. And I'm really a fan of, switching a song up halfway or somewhere, kind of giving people more than what they expected out of the song. Because often with songs, you could just keep the song exactly the same all the way through and it would be just fine. But I like to kind of surprise people and almost make them feel like they're getting more value for their money than maybe they do with some other stuff in some way.
Sure.
With other pop songs. But yeah, so I mean that process was fairly easy, and I had a lot of ideas for the arrangement, but the most difficult part was mixing it. Was trying to figure out, because I'm someone that wants like a zillion things going on at all times. Because that's just, I don't know how my brain works, but that doesn't always work in the actual real world of sound. Because like you have to like actually fit things together, and if there are too many things going on at the one time, it just becomes distracting and nothing. It just becomes a mess.
Yeah.
So I went through 3 different mixers to mix that track, and each time it was mixed, it was like I suddenly realized, okay, well this should actually be the main part because that's the most interesting and that gives the most impact. Or there's even now there's a lot of stuff going on at the end, but there were probably 3 times as many things going on before.
Wow.
So yeah.
Man, that's got to be such a challenge, but it came out all right.
Thanks. Thank you.
Cool. So tell us about the feel of the rest of the album. What can we expect?
Well, I mean, you're at the show, so you probably like got a little bit of a feeling for it. Yeah. But I'd say, the album, I didn't really plan it that way, but it just sort of made sense in the sense that it's kind of a journey from like, I'd say late afternoon into the evening and then into the night, which is why it's called When the Night. It starts out very bright and summery and positive and I guess happy in a sense, but also nostalgic and a bit melancholy. And it progresses towards the end of the album into kind of sort of a dancier area or more 4 on the floor. And then the end of the album, it has a bit of a darker tinge. Like it ends with Too Close and then it goes into When the Night. And they're both kind of, I'd say they're probably like September, Too Close, and When the Night are probably the 3 darkest songs on the album, even though they're not like dark, like Slit Your Wrists dark. They just have a bit of a darker, more melancholy feeling than the rest of the album.
So it's kind of an experience from beginning to end.
I hope so.
I just wanted to briefly talk about your really interesting background. You're from Johannesburg, South Africa, and of course now you're living in Brooklyn. In Johannesburg, you were very involved in the Drakensberg Boys Choir of South Africa, touring all over the place. I take particular interest in this because I'm a singer myself. And in fact, I was a previous member of the Southern California Children's Chorus and the All-American Boys Chorus. When did you start singing?
I started singing... I mean, I think I've been singing my whole life. Like my mom told me that I was singing before I could talk. I would like sing along to music videos and Michael Jackson and stuff before I could talk, apparently. And but then I joined that boys choir when I was 10. But I would say like, I was definitely singing my whole life, but I started taking it more seriously from when I was about 10. But I think at that age I wasn't taking it seriously for myself.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, I'm part of this choir. It's like this thing that I'm doing. But then over the years, as I sort of started discovering my own music taste and bands that I was getting into, I started kind of developing my own singing style, I guess, away from the whole classical thing.
Sure. And then you moved up to Liverpool to, kind of follow your dreams and off to Brooklyn, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I went to music school in Liverpool, to this place that Paul McCartney started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was just, it was just like a long journey, and I kind of developed my thing over the time.
Great. Now, I know you mentioned Michael Jackson, but I have some other listeners that are really interested to hear what your musical inspirations are, growing up, and even modern inspirations. You said Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Jackson's a huge one for me. But when I was really, really small, in South Africa, we sort of had somewhat kind of limited and protected access to like the global music scene. They would often ban records, and radio stations couldn't play those records, and it was kind of crazy in that sense. So we basically got the poppiest, nicest music imaginable. So like I was growing up listening to like Lionel Richie and Phil Collins and all like the biggest artists, I guess, of the 80s, and there was never this connotation for me of that being like sellout music or overly commercial. It was just like the music.
Wow.
That's the music that exists. And then, so that was big for me. But then, when I eventually got into Radiohead, and for a long time that was like the weirdest and most underground music that I could imagine. And then when I moved to England, I suddenly realized that there was this whole other music world that I just didn't even have any idea existed.
Right.
And I found out about like My Bloody Valentine and the Pixies and just like so many things that I had no idea about. And so I had a few years of, I guess, catching up on that stuff and feeling a bit self-conscious about my music tastes.
You even mentioned Mew on another blog somewhere, the album from Mew a few years ago, which was definitely something I wouldn't have expected.
they're I mean, I went through this whole phase where I was really, really into indie rock, I guess. And what I loved about Mew was like it felt at the time that everybody was making records that they were purposefully trying to make everything sound as small and kind of cheap as possible in a way. And Mew just made this album, or these albums, that just sounded massive and had beautiful melodies and super epic. And it wasn't like they were trying to pander to some like idea of what cool is or something, I think that leads me to what I'm sort of most inspired by with musical artists. And I think that is a musical artist that tries to break out of the confines of what their genre imposes on them, or their perceived genre imposes on them. Like, I think Kanye West is doing that at the moment, love him or hate him. I think Peter Gabriel did that. I think Kate Bush did that.
Obviously, you mentioned
Fleetwood
Radiohead.
Mac did that. Radiohead
and
obviously
Bjork.
did that. Bjork obviously did that. So I'm really inspired by that intent to kind of go beyond what people expect of you. And
when I hear your music, you create such a huge epic sound. Is it kind of just an extension of yourself, so there's no really barriers to your sound?
I mean, I would say, like I used to, write a lot of songs on the piano or on a guitar, but these days I write almost purely from like my subconscious. Like, I'll just be walking down the street and suddenly like a verse and a chorus will come into my mind, or just a verse or just a chorus. And if I'm close enough to my studio, I'll go there and start working on it. Or if I'm not, I'll just record it on my voice recorder. And then the whole process is it's very subconscious. I just let every idea that comes into my head, I just record it without, and I try not to judge it for as long as possible. And then, because sometimes there's something going on, and what I find is my subconscious is trying to express something that I can't really understand with my conscious mind. And the less I try and control it with my conscious mind, the more I'm surprised by the results, and the more I kind of like the results. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's but I find that if I follow that process, it becomes something that's like beyond me and my ego. It's like it becomes something more special. And so in that sense, I like to think that there's no boundaries to my sound, because I like to think that I'm not personally making that music. I mean, I am making it, but it feels to me like I'm just almost like a vessel for the music to come through in a way. I like to think of myself as an album artist, as well as, trying to make individual great songs. Yeah. And so often, I will, without knowing it, have finished a track a year or even 2 years before it actually gets released. Like, for example, with Closer Than This, I wrote the song. It was probably the first song I ever wrote that was a St. Lucia song, but I had no idea because I was still like in my rock phase, I guess. Yeah. And then, as I was finishing the EP, there was one track I was trying really hard to finish, and it's a song that's on the album now. It's called Wait for Love, and I just could not get it right. I felt like I was running up against a brick wall, and I went back and listened to some of my demos, and I heard Closer Than This, and then suddenly a spark hit me, and I finished it within a day. So the song basically took a day and a half from start to finish, but over like 2 years.
Wow. Right. One other thing I did want to touch on was your remixes. Tell me about what you try to accomplish with remixes.
Well, I like to just sort of be led by my subconscious, and if I get offered a remix, I might just like listen to the track when I get offered the remix once, and I'll decide, okay, do I want to do this or not? And then I won't listen to it again until I start the remix. And then what I'll normally do is, because when you do remixes, you get remix stems. You'll get like the vocals, you'll get drums, you'll get all the individual parts. Okay. And what I'll often do is I won't listen to the actual song altogether. I'll just solo the vocals, for example, in the beginning. And I'll just sort of, just from hearing the vocals, I think there's like something naturally within me that'll just start, like some kind of pattern will come into my mind. And then I'll just normally start from that. And then as I'm going along, I'll just keep adding more stuff. And then, adding some parts from the original track, and taking parts out that I don't think need to be there. And so it's just, again, it's like a very, very subconscious process. And I just sort of go along with it until it feels like a full expression of like what my own sort of interpretation of what that song could be.
Great. You've been producing a few of Heart's songs, or I guess you're producing their entire album, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been working with Heart's for, since before the St. Lucia EP was even out.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working together for a long time, and it took a long time for people to sort of catch on to them, and for them to get their whole label thing going. But I mean, so far I've been producing everything. I think because we're really busy now and they're busy, and we're not like in the same city that much. I think they might be starting to work with a couple of other people, but everything that they've done so far, and I think everything on the EP is produced by me. You've
sort of turned around their sound. Really impressed from the couple of singles that have recently come out. So again, great job as usual.
Thanks so much, man.
Cool. So to close out here, it looks like you have a few more tour dates coming up here. I mean, you're kind of touring a lot with Two Door Cinema Club again, right? Are you looking forward to touring with them again?
Absolutely. I mean, last time we toured with them, we weren't direct support. We were first of three.
Okay.
So it's going to be awesome to be direct support for them.
Oh, wow.
They're super, super nice guys.
Yeah, sure.
They've been trying to we've been trying to get back on the road together for a while. They offered us a tour in the UK, which we couldn't do. But yeah, it's exciting. It's going to be fun, I think.
Well, we can't wait for the Greek Theater date, November 2nd. And it looks like you just added another date before that in Pomona at the Fox Theater, I think November 1st. So, I did want to mention that there's something about your sound where it doesn't get old.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
that's definitely, my favorite music has always been, like I love great pop songs that you can just listen to a couple of times and just really get you in that moment. But the music that I think stays with you is the music that has the most layers to it. And I think or not just layers, but just like the most emotional layers and depth, I think. And, I think that's part of the reason why it takes me so long to finish stuff, is not because the actual physical recording process takes that long, but it takes that long for me to know which songs have kind of staying power and which ones don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I'm going to go throw on Elevate again right now.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, Sean, for joining us.
It's a pleasure, man.
On We Found New Music. And we'll catch up with you again. Hopefully, maybe we can have a live set by the beach in beautiful Laguna Beach sometime.
We hate the beach.
Okay, I know. This is the last type of sound I'd want to hear on the beach, obviously.
Cool, man. Great to talk to you.